This is the Lockpicker 1969, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to another episode of Interview with the Lockpicker. Today's guest is back by popular demand for a part 2 interview. I've brought back PickSmith. Say hi, PickSmith.
Hello. Thanks for having me back again.
So I get from comments by a number of people in your first part 1 interview, some people wanted you back, and you had indicated that you had more that you would have liked to have been able to say. So this is that opportunity. So I wanted to start out with going over, you had indicated that there were some additional people you didn't get to mention who were inspirational in your making picks.
Yeah, they're the guys that I met on Facebook, and most in particular RB Yan, who is an exceptional pick maker and machinist, and he makes a DD pick that just cannot be beat. There's Danielle in Italy, Lambda 2 as we mostly know him on the forums. Just an exceptional pick maker, and I have some of his work in just absolutely amazing. And then all the other guys that are there, Wes Poole, Daz Evers, just people that have a lot of instructional videos that I missed. It's just, when the heat of the microphone comes on, you blank out and you kind of forget some things. And, and I apologize to anybody else that I've missed that I've talked to and enjoyed listening and learning from. It's just been, there's so many that you just tend to forget them as you go along.
Well, I hadn't realized I had put that much pressure on you. I apologize for that.
It's the first time being interviewed. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So in the first interview, I kind of was alluding to a question about your design process, and I think you might have taken that because you answered it when you were talking about the handle part of it. I was asking about your metal design process, and you and I talked a little bit before conducting this right now about that. So can you talk to that a bit? What your actual design process is?
So when I'm designing a pick, a lot of times I go with the handle first because it's going to be the pick itself. And then I will pick which type of tang orientation. We have a reverse orientation where the tang is at the top of the pick and the profile comes up above the top of the handle, middle, straight in the middle like we're used to seeing, or bottom orientation, which is what DMAC is doing in his custom pick making series, where it comes down to the bottom of the pick and then comes up from there. Handle design, well, in designing the tangs and the profiles themselves, what I tend to do, since I have a lot of picks, is I'll actually use my picks as a template. Say I'm going to make a tall hook, I'll grab a tall hook from LLT, or if I want to try a teardrop, I'll put a teardrop on there. And I'll use their tangs and the tip on a drawing if I have onto the handle and create the flowing arches to create the support to it, and use that and draw it right onto the piece of metal that I'm going to make the pick out of. And then I just use a Sharpie to start with, but then at that point I'll use a water-based Sharpie that XB Mods Jason turned me on to. That's great for this because it holds up to the quenching as you're making the pick.
Oh, really?
And I'll make it.
Maybe you can provide me with a link to that, and I can put it in the comments for this video. People can.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. And when I do this, I actually do the reverse. So I'm inking the outside of the pick just for a rough idea of where I need to get to with the grinding wheel. And a lot of times I'll grind the entire pick on just a grinding wheel and a bench grinder. But if I'm doing a specialty tip or something, then I'll get really close to where I want to be. And then I'll shape with needle files or a Dremel, just the cutoff wheel, just to real fine little tiny strokes. Using a file helps a lot too, where you can really control curves and you can create a different curve my bench grinder's so worn that my wheels have 4 different curves on each the 2 stones I have, that I can create almost any shape I want to just with the stones that I have.
How many
And I
bench
do that.
grinders have you gone through?
I still have the one.
Okay.
Bought it years ago and still have the one. They tend not to break. A lot of times you may need to replace the wheel at some point, but mine are still in a good life. And if you treat them well and go slowly with them, with the metal, they don't wear out They don't wear out at all. And it's interesting too. If you watch D-Mac's video, he's got the pick on the tool rest on there. But I'll actually hold the steel and I'm up on the free floating wheel and cutting that way and grinding into it freehand. I'm doing the support for the steel, but it does 2 things for me. Is that I can feel the heat that I'm getting to in the metal itself, or lack of heat, as the case may be, because when you're working the handle area, you can get it a little bit hotter. It's not a problem. But if you're out at the tang or the very tip of the tang reveal and the profile, you have got to go so slow and quench. Just you do a little bit and you do a little bit and
Yeah.
quench, do a little bit, quench, a little bit and quench. You do not want to change the color of the steel. You do not
Yeah.
want that steel to become to a point where you can't touch it.
Yeah. No.
Anything below that, and it's probably a little bit more dangerous doing that. But I've had so much experience around tools and everything else that I'm comfortable doing it and can shape it.
So, can you tell me a little bit about, you talked to me a little bit about your different approaches as to full tang versus half tang handles?
Yeah, they're 2 different disciplines to me, because half tang is all about the handle. So you'll cut the tang slot, shape your handle. The metal is a secondary portion to it as well too, because it comes in and gets fit into there. It needs to be part of the design process in what orientation or what you're going to make the pick look like. But the handle becomes the most important part on that, where with a full tang, the metal becomes the handle too. So you need to first shape the handle the way you want it to be, along with the tang and profile. But the scales that you put onto that are now going to be the same shape as the pick itself that you do. So everything can be done. You're shaping the whole piece of steel versus the other way. I'm shaping the handle to a rough size and then creating the steel to put it in. Um, Also, with the full tang, I tend to use pins all the time, because it does 2 things for me. It stabilizes the scales to the pick, and it also gives me a way to cut the scales out to the pick itself. Because at first I was taught by Matt's Lock Pit, and all the guys on Facebook, of saying, yeah, leave a millimeter of your material out around your tang or your handle, and then after you're done gluing, you'll just grind and file it to fit. Well, I did that, and it's like, God, this is a lot of work. And it's like, I wonder what happens if I just actually cut the scale to the same size as my metal. And so I did that, and it's like, this is so much easier, because I can squeeze the epoxy out, and as it's squeezing out, I'll actually wipe it off, so there's less for me to deal with later for the epoxy.
Yeah.
Um, and it became a different process for me and easier. It's one of those things, you think about it and you go, I think I can do this differently, and it works, and you're like, okay, I'm not doing it any other way now.
Okay.
So it's the 2 different processes are based upon what you want the handles to look like, but they are 2 different skill sets. The half tang, in a way, is easier to make, and the full tang is harder to make. But they both take time. They're 2 different beasts, because cutting the tang slot, as you are now familiar with, is not as easy as it looks.
Well, I would
But
imagine with a half tang, you have a little bit more flexibility in how you shape your handle, as with a full tang, you're making the handle fit the pick, right? So
Well,
you have a little less
that
freedom.
no, because you still have the same freedom. The only difference is that, for example, I made a pick that was like finger bones.
Yeah,
So
I've seen that.
it's
That was awesome.
a little bit bigger, a little bit rounder. I couldn't do that as easily in a full tang, but for any shape that you can do in a half tang, you can do in a full tang as long as you have the right piece of steel. And it may need to be bigger because you're making a inch flaring tail out at the end or something like that. But you could do it both ways, but you'd have to get bigger steel. There is a creativity openness, I guess you could say, about a half tang because you're just working within the wood size you have, and a lot of times you're working with a bigger piece of wood than you're ever going to make for the pick itself.
Okay.
So you can. There's one I made for Danielle Lambda 2 that was out of Granadillo wood. So it's got this comfortable front skinny end, but then it goes into this big flaring tail with a tip on it. It would be hard to do in a full tang. It could be done. Um, for example, if you ever deep dive Jason Jarvis XB mods on the custom pick makers um, on Facebook, he made a pick for Andrew Law, who is the owner of LLT, and he made this big giant pick that says LLT, and it's a full half tang done in the letters LLT. And it is the monster pick. I mean, he probably took a foot by foot piece of steel and cut it into this. And, yeah, you're limited to your imagination when it comes to it and the work you want to put into it. It can be done both ways, but in a half tang or a full tang, we tend to make them in a smaller look. A half tang could be a little bit bigger at the back end because it's just decoration back there. But where your hands go, you got to make it comfortable into the size that's comfortable for you. I
Mm-hmm.
do tend to prefer a slightly larger handle, something with a little more bulk to it. It's just more comfortable. And I have
Yeah.
also found that I actually prefer a little bit more weight as well too. So when I'm doing half tangs and you put a brass liner in there underneath the scales or a copper liner, it just adds this heft to the pick, which I just love. It just actually adds more control than being a light thing because your leverage point becomes you and the pick as opposed to just you, or you can overforce a pin with that extra little weight. I find it a little bit easier sometimes just for setting pins, but it's a personal preference, and some people their hands get tired
Mm-hmm.
with a heavy pick.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me about soft pink.
Soft pink. So I did it last year, and what I wanted to do was since October, and this is a perfect month for it. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so I wanted to make a pink pick, and I was goofing around with different designs, and I created this real harsh looking pick with points and curves and a tail on it, and what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a pick that was soft in the hand but looked harsh. So it's a super comfortable pick. It's crazy how comfortable it looks, but it just looks so harsh and uninviting that you don't want to hold on to it. So it was a study in making something look harsh but be very comfortable in the hand and soft in the hand. So it ended up being soft pink because it's soft in the hand and it's pink in color. And I made a second one this year uh, for that too. So it's something that I'm probably going to do once a year just for that tribute to that. And I've had people want that pick. Pick went crazy, but I haven't been able to get to the people that want more of them too. So
Cool.
someday.
Okay. So you mentioned to me a little bit about knife making. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So after I had made my first set, which was I just took some hooks from Sparrows. Or actually, it was the SS Dev set, which I still use today, and I just put some handles and pins into there. I got to thinking, going, I want to, what could be a little bit different in a handle? So I started playing around with making a knife on the back end of a Sparrow's pick. So the handle of the pick, or the handle of the knife, is where the tang comes out, and that's where you hold it. And then the back end, the tail, becomes the blade. And so I had created a set, which I gave to my son, which was the first set of knives in the handles. And then I had created a second set where the whole scale is a piece of wood on each side, half tang on Sparrows, with different handles, with different blades on the front of them, but all in a single piece of wood and with pins in it to mimic the look of a knife on a pick. Then actually it was my first trade of a pick with another person, which was Matt Davies, Matt's lock pit. He said, I like those knives. He's into knives and a daily EDC daily carry. And so I asked him, what do you want? And so I made him a pick. It's a clip point. What was it? A clip drop point with a handle on it. And I had been using koa wood at that time because it's just gorgeous wood. And I started to make him one like I was making before. And unfortunately, I overfiled the blade. And it's like, I'm looking at this going, what can I do with this? This is destroyed. I either have to start new or try something else. And what I ended up doing was cutting off the blade, leaving the handle there. And I took some different koa, turn the orientation of the wood up and down versus the length to make it strong, because I had it strong on the handle. And I created a Damascus blade. So I had the woods going two different directions.
Cool.
And that created the second generation. And in that, I played with two brass tube pins, an 1/8 inch, and I made wood inserts, hand making dowels to fit in the tubes, to make a mosaic pin that's metal and wood with a different contrasting color than the handle. And so I sent that off to him, and while it was in transit, I said, you know what? Let me try and I have an idea for this now. And so I made the third generation, where I did everything like that. I put a brass liner, the pins with the wood fillers. I used a rosewood handle for darkening, and then I did a koa Damascus on it. So it's a real figured piece of wood, and Mr. Picker actually has that one now. And then after that, and then I kind of got into the custom making of a full pick, and I'd always had my mind to go back to it, to make a full custom knife maker. So I made the Generation 4 here not too long ago for Jeff Burke. He wanted a Tonto blade, so I did copper liners, oak, bogwood oak handles and he had sent me a piece of burled oak, which I made into the Damascus blade. And then I did brass and copper mosaic pins with brass and copper dot inlay on that. And that had a bijou profile because that's his favorite profile. Um, it didn't start out the way I wanted. I wanted to do to make it look like a real knife, but there were some aspects I couldn't get down, so I had to shift gears, and I did it this way, and it ended up being stellar. I love the way it came out looking.
Okay. Well,
But
maybe
it was just
I
playing with stuff.
was going to say maybe you could give me some links to that work as well, so the audience can click on that to go see what you're referring to.
All I can do is do the Facebook post, I think.
Okay. If you can give me those links, I'll put them in the comments for the video.
Okay.
People can go find it. Last question.
Yeah.
Had a few people ask about this, to explain more about what Dan and Matt means in black belt.
Well, so the belt system as we know it is also, it's a mirror of the martial arts belting systems.
Yep.
And once you, I mean, in a sense, they're all different Dans, as we talked about earlier, that they're different degrees of your level. But once you get to black belt, where do you go from there? Well, they have Dans after that, different degrees of levels past that point, for your experience and knowledge. So basically, black belt is your first Dan level, and then you get to Dan level 2. And the mat is a direct reference to the dojo mats in the training room or training dojos for martial arts. So when you use the belt system and you're mimicking martial arts, I think it just became a natural progression to do that. And I have heard, actually, it's when they announce black belts. You'll a lot of time on Discord. A lot of times you'll hear whoever the moderator is that's announcing that new black belt person. We would like to welcome to the dojo this new black belt.
Yep. Yep.
So we use the martial arts within the belting system. So the mat just became a place for special projects, in a sense, where you're learning to do different things, which is part of your progression in life, in martial arts and in lockpicking.
Yeah, I think what people were expecting was that Dan was some acronym for something, and it's not. It's just
No,
just a different interpretation from a different language that essentially means degree. So
exactly. I think
yeah,
we researched that right before we started
yeah,
this, that we
yep,
both found the same thing.
yep.
It's just the Japanese language or Oriental language translated into English.
So was there anything else you wanted to say to our audience before we end this episode?
I want to thank them for bringing me back again, because it's this is such a fun process, and I would really like to invite every picker to do this at some point. Um, it's great to hear other people's stories. It's great for the experience, and I've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed recruiting people to help this series go on.
Yes, and I appreciate
Um,
that.
so we're making your list a little bit too long now, but
It's okay.
uh, we'll get to them all eventually. But I think that I think every picker should. I'd love to hear every picker's story, so I would like to invite everybody at some point to do this if you're willing.
All right, thank you. Well, so we'll wrap up this episode. I want to thank you again for coming back and talking some
You're
more. And
welcome.
I know I've been picking your brain and everybody else's brain a little bit as I starting my own pick making journey myself. Um, Thank you again, and I want to thank everybody that's tuned in and listened to us talk. If you have not done so already, if you're not already a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button and make sure you are clicking for notifications and turning on all so that you're made aware of new content like this, as well as announcements for giveaways and drawings and other content. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.